Welcome to the Explainer. So today we're diving straight into a massive topic, the complex, yet absolutely crucial world of integrating remote care into a modern medical practice. If you're navigating the crazy, ever-evolving landscape of digital health, well, you already know that just flipping on a webcam, yep, that's literally just the tip of the iceberg. We're going to unpack the clinical, ethical, and financial guidelines that actually make remote care sustainable for the long haul. To kick things off, let's look at this really powerful insight from Dr. Randall Williams in the AMA Playbook. He says, implementation is about picking your destination and knowing where you're going and then working your way backwards on how to get there. I mean, talk about setting the perfect strategic tone, right? Success in digital health absolutely requires a crystal clear roadmap before you execute even a single technical step. You really have to know exactly what you want to achieve, clinically and financially, long before you start building out your infrastructure. All right, so here's our roadmap for the day. We're going to cover the telemedicine evolution, define the whole RPM and RTM alphabet soup, and explore some real-world clinical applications. From there, we'll hit on ethics and privacy before wrapping it all up with the highly anticipated Medicare billing rules and those essential 2025 updates. Okay, let's jump right into Section 1, the telemedicine evolution. You know, the COVID-19 pandemic acted as this totally unprecedented catalyst. It forced a massive, accelerated shift from those traditional, episodic, in-person visits to continuous digital care models. Things that might have taken years of slow, gradual implementation happened, well, almost overnight. And that shift, it's permanently altered how clinics operate. Just look at a modern clinical workflow now. It starts with a patient appointment request, flows straight into clinical triage, and then hits this absolutely crucial decision point, the telemedicine eligibility check. Only after that does it branch into either a virtual consult or an in-person visit before finally converging back for follow-up planning. The takeaway here, telemedicine isn't just a backup option anymore. No way. It's a core structural component of the initial patient assessment pathway. Moving right along to Section 2. Defining RPM and RTM. Let's clear up this acronym soup. The conceptual anchor here is so vital to grasp. Remote physiologic monitoring, or RPM, is strictly about bodily metrics. We're talking objective vital signs, things like weight, blood pressure, pulse oximetry, and respiratory flow rate. RTM, on the other hand, stands for remote therapeutic monitoring, and this focuses on non-physiologic data. So think of things like a patient's adherence to their medication, the status of their respiratory or musculoskeletal system, and their self-reported response to therapy. Essentially, these are two very distinct lenses through which we can view a patient's health while they're at home. Now, the absolutely crucial point here is understanding the shift from simply monitoring to actual management. The American College of Cardiology defines remote patient management as the recording, saving, transmitting, and interpreting of health parameters outside a clinical setting to actively guide therapeutic interventions. Notice the emphasis there? It's the stark difference between passively collecting a giant stream of data and actively using that data to tweak a treatment algorithm, prevent an acute event, or adjust medication in real time. It's a real game changer. Up next is Section 3, Real-World Clinical Applications. It's honestly amazing to see the immense versatility of these platforms across different specialties. For instance, in teledermatology, specialists are using high-resolution imaging and asynchronous store and forward systems to keep track of skin lesions over time. Then you have telecardiology, which is integrating with wearable devices for continuous ECGs and remote blood pressure monitoring. The goal, catching cardiac events early. Telepsychiatry is delivering vital virtual therapy and medication management, completely knocking down major access barriers. And teleneurology, it allows for rapid stroke assessments. We are literally talking about saving lives by connecting rural emergency rooms with remote specialists in an instant. All right, moving into Section 4, ethics, privacy, and access. Because we need some strong guardrails here. As we continually expand our reach into the patient's home, it forces us to step back and ask a really fundamental question. Is our digital infrastructure actually secure and equitable? We're facing this dual challenge, right? We have to lock down highly sensitive health data, but at the exact same time, we have to ensure that the very technology meant to increase access doesn't accidentally create a brand new digital divide. Building a secure architecture is complex. It requires the telemedicine platform to actively pull and push data across the provider portal, the patient portal, the EHR system, and various analytics engines. And because of this sheer complexity, robust encryption standards and multi-factor authentication, they aren't just nice-to-haves or good ideas, they are absolutely mandatory for HIPAA-compliant data transmission. honestly, every single node in this whole ecosystem is a potential vulnerability that simply must be secured. From an ethical standpoint, telemedicine holds this incredible promise of overcoming geographic barriers, especially for rural patients trying to see specialists. But if we want to do this equitably, we've got to account for social determinants of health, or SDOH. For example, data collection requires medical devices specifically defined under Section 201H of the FDA. But here's the catch. To avoid putting a massive technical burden on a patient who, say, might not have reliable broadband internet, it is highly recommended to use cellular-enabled devices. Why? Because these devices transmit the data automatically. The patient doesn't have to fiddle with syncing to Wi-Fi or downloading complicated apps. It just works. Okay, let's get into the financial nuts and bolts. Section 5, Medicare billing requirements. All right, pay close attention to this magic number, 16. Ever since the end of the COVID-19 public health emergency, CMS has firmly reiterated a very strict standard. If you want to bill for primary device supply codes like CPT 99453 and 99454, you absolutely must collect and transmit at least 16 days of data within a 30-day period. Not 15 days, not an average across patients. You need 16 distinct days of data transmission per 30-day cycle. No exceptions. Now, the other magic number you need to remember is 20. When we're talking about billing for the actual treatment management services, the time where the clinician is sitting down, analyzing the data, and actively managing the care plan, CMS requires a strict minimum of 20 minutes of interactive communication and care management with the patient or their caregiver per calendar month. And there are a few absolutely vital compliance rules wrapping around those numbers that we need to cover. First off, advanced patient consent is totally mandatory and has to be clearly documented in the medical record. Second, only physicians or non-physician practitioners eligible to furnish EM services can actually bill for RPM. Third, these services can be deemed medically necessary for both acute and chronic conditions. Fourth, and definitely highlight this one, an RPM device usage day can count for RTM billing, but RTM days cannot be used for RPM reimbursement. Seriously, no double counting allowed. And finally, please remember that simple documentation errors regarding medical necessity and the exact time spent are a massive primary trigger for Medicare claim denials. Don't let that happen to you. And finally, that brings us to Section 6, Essential Updates for 2025. Let's talk about the bottom line. So at the top level, the big systemic change coming our way is a reduction. The 2025 physician fee schedule conversion factor is officially set at $32.35. That represents a decrease of 94 cents or a 2.83% drop compared to the 2024 conversion factor. And as you can probably guess, this reduction is expected to proportionally decrease reimbursement rates pretty much across the board for services billed under the PFS. We can clearly see the direct financial impact of this on a key code like CPT 99454, which covers the monthly device supply and data transmission. The rate is dropping from $46.83 in 2024 down to $43.02 in 2025. Now, sure, that might seem like a pretty small dip per patient, but when you multiply that drop across a huge patient panel over 12 solid months, well, it absolutely emphasizes the desperate need for scale and extreme efficiency in your clinic's remote operations. Interestingly enough, while the device supply reimbursement dropped, CPT 99453, which is the code for the initial RPM setup and patient education, actually saw a tiny little bump up to $19.73. Meanwhile, the management codes, 99457 for that first 20 minutes and 99458 for each additional 20 minutes, both saw slight decreases, right in line with that overall conversion factor adjustment. So what does this all mean for you? And what's the action plan to safeguard your revenue cycle? Well, here is a clear 3-step plan you can implement literally today. Step 1, audit your technology right now to ensure full FDA device compliance and rigorous HIPAA data security. Step 2, train your clinical and billing staff inside and out on documenting that 16-day transmission rule and the 20-minute interaction minimum. And Step 3, update your billing systems today to reflect these 2025 rate adjustments. You really don't want to be caught off guard by changing receivables. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a bit of a challenge. Try to look past the dense billing codes for a second. Remote patient management is fundamentally transforming healthcare. So with margins tightening, how will your practice leverage this continuous real-time data stream to finally transition away from reactive, volume-based tasks and move toward proactive, true value-based care? It is an incredible opportunity to genuinely improve patient outcomes, and the blueprint is sitting right here in front of you. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll catch you in the next one.